This is your host, Stephen Sargeant, Around the Coin podcast. We had Naveen Jain, who is a contributor to the Tari universe. Honestly, this is kind of amazing, everyone. Mining your own cryptocurrency using, nothing but a laptop or a computer. He talks about why that's important, why confidentiality as a feature, and, why is that important to us? When everyone's seeing your financial statements on certain blockchains like Ethereum and Bitcoin and everything. And with the advent of blockchain investigations, we're going to be able to trace those transactions 20 years from now when we get more digital. This is all going to be very relevant. And Naveen really breaks it down and so passionate. But the first half of this episode, to all our payment, tech, crypto entrepreneurs, I go deep about his serial entrepreneurship. He's candid about what he's investing in, how much the checks he was cutting, even goes into some of his, angel investing, as well as him being the entrepreneur and what he's working on back in Silicon Valley. And then the last half, about 45 minutes, we go deep into some fun things about what are they doing at Tari, what is making this different from other protocols out there, and why on earth would they start an L1, layer one blockchain, and he fills in all the gaps. Really great episode. I really hope you guys sit through the whole thing. So I think you get some value. You get some he does share his screen and shows us how we could also, mine our own cryptocurrency like Tari from their network. It's about to go on, mainnet. They're still in testnet. This is kind of like an exclusive feature. We normally don't do this, but I had such a fun conversation. I prodded them to give us all the good stuff. So definitely listen to this episode and let me know what you think. This is your host, Stephen Sargeant. The Around the Coin podcast welcomes Naveen Jain. Now, there is some confusion about the name, but this is a different Naveen Jain. He is the contributor of Tari. And Naveen, why don't you just give a quick introduction of who you are? I'm going to dive into your vast amounts. I think I spent 7 minutes on LinkedIn scrolling through every single project that you've invested in, contributed to, or just, advised. So I'm really interested to kind of go through some of those and pick out, what were some of the winners, what were some of the losers, what did you miss out on? But tell us a little bit quickly about, who Naveen is and how you got here.
Yeah. First of all, Stephen, thank you so much for having me. Really honored to be here. Yeah. So I have a background in, computer engineering. I studied at Purdue for a year. I dropped out and then I bootstrapped my first company in the music space. And so I basically started from nothing and started building websites for artists and running online stores for artists and built that to a pretty sizable business. Then I bootstrapped my second company in the logistics industry, had an opportunity to put a nonprofit project I co-founded through Y Combinator, and then started angel investing in startups. So I've angel invested now in, I don't know, it's a lot. It's probably close to 100 or more companies at this point, or companies and projects. Companies like Flexport and Squire and, Layer Zero and many other things. And then I got involved directly in the crypto space in 2016 as a Monero miner. And then I started contributing to the Tari project in around 2017.
I think that's where, this very conversation is, privacy coins is still a hot topic. I was at an event with KPMG, a large consultancy, Chainalysis, blockchain analyst company, and the regulator in Canada was their FinTrack, and they still have like privacy coins as like a huge concern for them. Like, I want to ask him, like, how many instances do you see a report about suspicious activity, in cryptocurrency involving privacy coins? I was a blockchain investigator. It doesn't come up as much as I think people think it would because of the nature of it. And we'll dive down deep into that and, maybe play a little bit of a devil's advocate on both sides of the table. Now,
Sure.
You're a serial entrepreneur. You were in YC in 2014. As an entrepreneur, we have a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this podcast. I'm an entrepreneur. When I think of like starting and building another business after, dedicating my whole life, like that's the last thing you think of while you're
Yeah.
in the midst of a business. Is that a different environment when you're in, Silicon Valley and YC? Is it just like a natural state of mind? Is it the mindset like, hey, I'm going to build this hard. If it works out, it works. If it doesn't, pick myself up, take my learnings and build something else? And like, how did you manage, maybe even failure or discouragement through that process?
Yeah, 100%. So my view is that being a entrepreneur is a blessing. You know, it's really hard. I mean, you know this as an entrepreneur yourself, and anyone who's listening to this knows that being an entrepreneur is, the way I kind of view it, is sort of like getting punched in the face on the daily, you know? However, it's an opportunity to build something that you're really passionate about, right? Like it's an opportunity to do something, achieve greatness in like around something that you care about. And that's very different than being like, you know, an employee or working for someone else. And entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. You know, I think that's one of the challenges, is that there's a lot of like romanticism around being an entrepreneur, but it's gritty, man. It's really gritty. I mean, you got to get in there and you got to roll up your sleeves and you got to really want it. And there are days where you wake up and you're just like, today is going to suck. And you've got to kind of, you know, say whatever affirmations you say in the mirror, you know, in the morning, and just like kind of make it happen. And so I don't know. I love it. I mean, the last time I had a job was when I was, I think, 18 or 19. I was a bank teller for a summer. That was my last job. So I don't really know anything else. I just know that I feel really blessed to be able to build stuff. And yeah, obviously, I hope and pray people like the stuff that I get to work on. That's important for many reasons. So yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
I love it. You brought me back to 18 with that hat, Rage Against the Machine. 'Cause I remember that in high school, like Nine Inch Nails, Rage Against the Machine. I remember a lot of those bands on people. Back in the day, stickers were huge in locker rooms. But take me back before 18. Was
Yeah.
there any tendencies that you had? Like I remember in grade two, like going door to door and selling like fake, diamond earrings with my friend, or shoveling the driveway when everybody else was, playing, and I was shoveling the driveway to get $10. Was there some things that you realize now, like, oh, I was kind of like just wired a little bit differently than everybody else, that, at that age were maybe enjoying their childhood the right way, whereas I was always thinking from like a business or an entrepreneurial perspective?
Yeah, good question. Well, so before 18, you know, I was really, really involved in, let's just say, like alternative communities online related to things like wares and other kinds of things. And so I definitely had, you know, I guess tendencies around building my own thing and kind of like marching to my own drum beat. I mean, my parents are immigrants from India, and there was a lot of expectation for me to become a doctor or become a lawyer or like some other form of an engineer, perhaps, you know, like some other professional thing. And so I remember, you know, the phone call with my parents where I told them that I'm dropping out of school. And you can imagine that didn't exactly go very well. So yeah, I think I've always had sort of a vibe of just, you know, marching to my own drum beat and doing something different. And that's certainly started before 18 and is like carried all the way through to today with how I operate and what I do.
Do you feel like is there a lot of pressure? Like, you hear the story, especially with, Indian, that
Yeah.
doctor, lawyer, like engineer. Is that like the real pressure? Like, his family members call you from back home and saying, Naveen, what are you doing? Like, is it real pressure? Or is it just kind of that like underlying expectation? And do your parents have a different view now that they've seen you successfully navigate this world? Has that opened their eyes, if they're still here with us? Has that opened their eyes or other people's eyes? Like, hey, there's an other way to do this. There's another way other than school and in a job that may not fulfill you to achieve the same type of happiness or success.
Yeah, so I think the pressure is real. That being said, you know, my dad was also an entrepreneur. And so I think he had especially more of an appreciation and understanding of, okay, you know, here's someone who wants to, you know, build their own thing, do their own thing. And I think it was more for him, you know, am I really willing to do the work? You know, am I really willing to like hustle? Because again, you know this, everyone who's listened to this knows this. If you aren't willing to do the work, if you aren't willing to hustle, and I think one of the things about being an entrepreneur is you have to be willing to do any job, right? And do it with like gusto. Like you have to really, really, really want it. And so I think when he saw that in me, that okay, hey, he really wants this, he's willing to do the work, I think then the pressure was kind of off. I also think that starting, you know, I started my first company when I was 19. And I think that's a really good thing for people to consider is like when they're really young, start something because you don't have other pressure, right? Like now I'm married, I have kids, like there's all kinds of other pressures that come up as people kind of grow up and they're, the numbers start to fly in terms of age and you get to different stages of life. So I think, again, I feel super blessed that I was able to like do that and someone out there gave me opportunity, was willing to give me a shot with regards to the first business I built. Otherwise, I frankly wouldn't be here with you today.
You famously, were known for like cold calling Linkin Park with, which is
True.
huge. I think their front person has passed since, but maybe just walk us through that, that scrappiness and grittiness. Like what even, how did you even get a number to get in contact with them? Or did you go to like their old WhatsApp page? Like not even WhatsApp back then, like did they have, I forgot the name of the platform we used to use, like MSN Messenger,
Yeah.
My Page. Did you go to their My Page site and like message them? Like, how did you get in contact with Linkin Park?
Yeah, so I had started a web development company. The company is actually still around, although now it mostly focuses on e-commerce. It's called SparkArt. And what happened is I'd started building websites for like local businesses in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I'm from. And I went to go see a Perfect Circle show at the Warfield in San Francisco. And after the show, there was a gal out front, what we called a street teamer in music business, like parlance. And she was handing out cassette tapes for new bands. And one of the tapes I happened to pick up was a sampler tape for Linkin Park. And I remember listening to the tape. I know for a fact One Step Closer was on the tape. It's probably One Step Closer, maybe Paper Cut. I don't remember like exactly which songs. There's like 2 or 3 songs on the tape. It's like a sampler tape, right? And I remember just like thinking they were incredible. I was like completely blown away. I was really into, heavier music at the time. I was listening to like lots of Korn and A Perfect Circle and Limp Bizkit at the
Yeah.
time. Like that was sort of the era, right? Like that was the time for this kind of stuff. Like I was also listening to like Alice in Chains, Rage Against the Machine. And I visited their website and I just thought that I could probably help. I just thought like maybe I could, again, I was running a web development business. So I just thought like maybe I can help these guys, and make an impact. And I did a who is on the domain and they actually had a real phone number registered, right? They actually had a real number registered at the time because the band wasn't big, right? This was
Right.
like a baby band playing like clubs. And this was, before Hybrid Theory came out. So they weren't like huge. Like everyone thinks about Linkin Park today and they think about this like giant, super successful band, which
Yeah, the
obviously they
collab with
are.
Jay-Z, like they think
Oh,
about like
incredible. And
the
by the way, they're back now. Like they have a new lead singer and they're touring again, which is incredible. And the new lead singer is amazing. Her name is Emily and she's like seriously incredible. If you've not heard her sing, she is amazing. And anyway, so I cold called the number. That's where that story comes from. And Chester's brother, Brian Bennington, picked up the phone. And I kind of cold pitched him on the fly. I was like, look, I'm a fan. I would love to help with, the Linkin Park website. I think I could really, really help. I have a bunch of really creative ideas. And he said, I think the band is playing a show in San Francisco in
no
the next
way.
whatever amount of time. Why don't you meet up with them? And I was like, okay,
Sure.
let's go. Let's do it. So the band opened for another band called Orgy. So it was Linkin Park and it was a live 105 Halloween show at what was the name of the venue? It was the Maritime Hall. And Maritime Hall, I think, no longer exists. Like, I don't think this venue even exists anymore. And I remember pulling up. It was a 21 and up show. I remember like calling Mike because I wasn't 21 yet. So Mike had to like kind of like say I was just like part of the band or whatever, or like helping the band and kind of like sneak me in. And I remember what I really remember is the band's performance because I remember 2 things. I remember the band's performance because there was basically no one there because, Hybrid Theory, I think at that point had just come out. And so they were still like early in their rise, and I was one of maybe like, I don't know, a couple dozen people there, maybe getting to listen to Linkin Park play Hybrid Theory front to back which is crazy to think about,
Yeah.
right? Because they're so huge. Just can't imagine that. And then the other thing I remember about them was they stayed after that show to sign every autograph. Like any fan that wanted to stay after, it didn't matter how tired they were, didn't matter what was going on. Like they stayed after to sign every last autograph. And that just made a huge impact on me because I was like, these guys really care. Like they care about their craft. They're incredible
Right.
musicians. The music is off the charts. Hybrid Theory is like all hits. It's like one of the most iconic records of all time. And they are willing to do anything and everything for their fans. And that carries through to this day. Like to this day, that's just how they operate. And so yeah, I had an opportunity to work with them, for many years, Hybrid Theory through like Minutes to Midnight. I ran LinkinPark.com. I, built the first Linkin Park Underground, which is
What
their
were you
fan
helping
club.
with? Was it like patching in, paying for merch? Like, what were you helping with back at that time? Was it just like, hey, we just did
Yeah.
a song, taking clips, putting them on the website? What were
No,
they
I ran
struggling
the
with?
I built the website. Like we designed, developed, hosted. This is pre AWS. So
Oh, wow.
LinkinPark.com was hosted on servers that I owned and were like racked and stacked in a data center because there was no AWS. And I remember the website traffic was so nuts. We just had to keep adding servers
That's
because
crazy.
it was Linkin Park, right? The Linkin Park forums had their own server because we had like over 1 million registered users on the message board at peak, right? This is like peak Hybrid Theory, right? I remember launching the first Linkin Park Underground. I mean, it was insane. I mean, it was like a fan club for the biggest band in the world, right? At the time. And so, yeah, I mean, all their digital marketing stuff, I was involved with. They gave me the opportunity to be involved with everything. And so I'm very, very lucky that I had the opportunity to work with them in that capacity because they're superstars. Who am I? I'm just a dude, who's like building websites, right? I'm a nobody. And
And did
I had
that
an
open up
opportunity.
other opportunities? Maybe obviously you had lots of artists, G-Eazy, I think Hootie and the Blowfish, I remember from back in the days, Lil Wayne. Did you have an opportunity to have the same relationship with other artists where you're meeting
Sure.
them and organizing, or
Yeah.
is it more back end?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when you're in the music business and, obviously we had a lot of success with Linkin Park. I had an opportunity to do similar work for Korn and Slipknot, Carrie Underwood, The Killers, had an opportunity to work a little bit with Lil Wayne, many others. When you're in the music business and you're working directly with artists, the artists really care. Like the artists are, they're masters of their craft. They really understand culture. Like every single one of these artists are literally defining culture. And, how a fan interacts with them deeply matters, right? So they do care about their websites and they care about, ticket prices and how fans are able to engage with them around merchandise or other sorts of, sort of like mediums. And so, yeah, I've had plenty of opportunity to spend time with artists that I'm a huge fan of or that I think are, rock stars. And yeah, that's definitely part of the gig.
That's awesome. And then you go on like an investing, what some would call bootstrapping marathons, I think what I wrote down here, where you take several companies to 7 to 8 figures. Walk us through the process. We have so many people from payment, tech, crypto, entrepreneurs listening to this podcast. Walk us through the process of decision making of what looked like a good opportunity for you to start a business versus what looked like a shiny ball syndrome where you're like, hey, this is popular. And how did you keep from like jumping over to something else? Or maybe you did that during the time where you're jumping over to something else. Did you put someone that you're like, hey, that's an operator, they can handle this one, start, spending a little bit of time building up something else? Walk us through that process. Because when you're an entrepreneur, it sounds good on paper, but like as an operator, it sounds like extremely stressful to be managing or at least have your, headspace involved with so many different projects.
Yeah. So at the beginning, I definitely had a lot of shiny object syndrome for sure. I would definitely, I built a pretty successful Facebook game, when Facebook first launched their platform. I built a analytics product that was really successful in the music business for several years. I built a lot of different things but didn't necessarily put all of my energy into any one of those things, right? And it took me several years to really learn that if you really want something to be massively successful, you have to focus. Like focus is, and so, what I ended up doing is saying, okay, I'm going to have a world where I have several business units. I'm going to hire people. Like if it's not going to be my focus, it has to be someone's focus.
Right.
And that's totally cool. So I'm gonna work with other people who can make it their focus and like really work closely with them as much as I need to, so that I can have the opportunity to do what I want to do in terms of where I want to focus my energy. And then as it relates to investing in other entrepreneurs, to me, it's always about the people, right? So over time, I've learned a lot about, I've refined my filter, if you will, in terms of, what is the right kind of person, what is, maybe not the right kind of person in terms of someone that I'm willing to back. And it really comes down to how much does the person want it? Like, do they have that fire in the belly? Are they willing? Because look, the reality is vast majority of startups and companies fail, right? But most failure is essentially suicide, not homicide. People basically giving up because they weren't able to raise the capital, or they weren't able to make it, figure out how to get product market fit, or whatever the challenge was that, came up in their business. And the best entrepreneurs are willing to just find a way, right? They're willing to like dig really, really deep and find a way. And those are the entrepreneurs that end up being like the best people to back, right? So, I had a couple early wins as a angel investor, which again, very lucky. Actually, the very first check I wrote is a company that got sold to Square, or sorry, Block Inc., whatever Jack Dorsey's company is called. Block.
Whatever he calls it now.
Yeah, whatever he calls it now. So, which doesn't really happen. What I did before I started angel investing is I met with some other famous angel investors and got their advice. So one of the key pieces of advice I got was, if you're going to start angel investing, you have to write at least 20 checks. Like don't write like one check and expect, oh my God, I'm an angel investor now and I'm going to like make all this money, because it's kind of a numbers game. You kind of have to look at it as, okay, I'm going to invest in some things. There's definitely going to be things that fail. You're never going to have 100% hit rate. And every investor loves to talk about their wins. They don't really talk about their losses, right? They, that's just also natural. And so that's what I committed to. I was like, all right, I've got a pool of capital. I can commit to writing at least 20 checks. And let's just see what happens. Let's see if I can figure it out on my own. So I started meeting with tons of entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, and again, got some really, really good opportunities in terms of getting in, relatively early rounds of great startups. And that's how I started my sort of angel investing part of my journey.
And what was you don't have to go into specific details, but what was the average check do you think you're writing? Are we talking 25,000 a check, 100,000 a check, or did it vary depending on, how close you were to the project or to the entrepreneur?
Yeah. I mean, so today my check sizes range from like, I don't know, 20 grand on the low end to, 150, 200 grand on the high end. It just sort of depends on, my level of conviction, frankly, in the opportunity. Earlier on, I was writing smaller checks, 10 grand, 15 grand, 20 grand, because that's all I had. I'm not a venture capital firm, right? It's just, I'm just investing personal capital, right? So today, I can invest more because, I have, made some money, so I can, invest more in things that I have conviction in. But that's my general sort of check size range.
And do you have a rolling fund, or is it just kind of you investing your personal money?
It's
Because
me.
I'm
I don't
assuming
have
if
a
your
rolling
friends see you
fund.
doing well, they're like, hey, what if I gave you some money to go along with your money and we both invested in these businesses?
Yeah. I mean, I have done things where I've set up like SPVs with around certain deals, but generally speaking, I'm a builder, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm so focused on like doing the thing that I'm doing that investing is sort of more of a hobby, right? It's not really like my number one thing. And so I just don't feel like it's the right thing for me to go and say, oh, I'm going to set up a fund, because then I have a responsibility to these people that are, trusting me to make good decisions in terms of their capital. So I've just decided not to do that. Maybe in a future phase, like maybe down the road, I'll say, all right, you know what? Now my focus is just investing. I'm not going to focus on building anything. The thing that I'm building is an investment company, and I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to be a venture capitalist or whatever. And that's a great choice. Like, that's something that maybe I will do in the future. But right now, I am really focused on building stuff, and I don't want to divert my attention and focus on being responsible now for other people's capital.
I love it. That's a really great approach. You say that not many, angel investors talk about their losses. What were some losses or even misses where you're like, I had a feeling about this company, wasn't, 100% convinced, or I was focused on something else. I didn't cut that, average check that I usually do. And then it blows up and you're like, yeah, I could see how that could happen. It was a good company. I just missed the boat there.
Yeah, I think, I obviously, like, look, there's companies that fail all the time, so we've definitely had our fair share of companies that just didn't work out. And that's, again, totally natural. I've definitely had companies where I had an opportunity to invest and I passed. And those really sting, right? Like, it really stings when it's a winner, right? Like, I there was a biotech company that ended up going public at like a crazy $8 billion valuation or something like that. And I had an opportunity to invest on a 20 mil, post money cap safe. And at the time, when I go back and look back at that, the lesson that I learned there was, at the time, I thought the valuation was too high, right? And instead of listening to my instincts, which were, this founder is a beast and their business is remarkable. And what I always try to do when I'm investing is really try to understand the entrepreneur's vision and project, like,
Right.
okay, if I was in the shoes of this entrepreneur and I understood the technology they're building or whatever they're bringing to market, what could the world look like 5 years from now or 10 years from now, assuming all the success in the world, assuming
Right.
they meet every objective that they have set for themselves? What does the world look like? And this is one of those scenarios where I could totally see it. I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally see it. I could totally see the world being a completely different place with this company being wildly successful. But for whatever reason, I had this thing where I was like, gosh, I'm going to invest, I don't know, $20,000 or whatever it was, some relatively modest sum at the time. And I just thought the price was too high. And fast forward today, now my policy is, if I really, really can see it, if I really, truly can, like, close my eyes and imagine this business at like massive scale, like massive scale, as long as the price is not completely crazy, right? Like, as long, I mean, there's definitely still a boundary there, right? There's some bound
And when
or
you say
level.
crazy, is it like you try to avoid the hype cycles? Like AI, you're like, hey, this is a
Yeah.
good company, but everyone's overpaying. Even I can see it as a serious angel
Yeah.
investor. I can see when there's a hype cycle and what buzzwords are being used, and like, hey, whatever the valuation is, it's a little too high, no matter what the company is.
Well, the problem is, when you're investing early in things, you're investing in future value, right? You're
Mm.
investing in the promise of something. You're not investing. If you invest in some startup in the first round and it's like a $10 million valuation, there's no way they could sell the company at that moment for $10 million, right? Like, there's no buyer at that price because they've not built anything yet. Especially if you're like first check, you're investing in the promise, like the promise of future value creation. And so what I always try to think about is, now what I do, I guess, sort of a refined filter, is I try my best to imagine what it could be. And then I try my best to imagine how the sort of value will evolve over time. Because at some point, someone is going to start valuing the business on fundamentals, right?
Right.
Someone is going to say, well, how profitable are they? And, all the different metrics related to a business.
Right.
What is their balance sheet going to look like? What is their cost to acquire a customer? What's their lifetime value of a customer? What's their average revenue per user, or whatever, whatever the metrics are for this particular business? Maybe it's a hardware business. What's their landed bill of materials? What's their landed bill of materials to MSRP ratio, or whatever the metrics
Yeah, the
are that.
metrics start coming out that they have to hit in order
Yeah,
for
yeah.
them.
Like
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So if it was a hardware business, so I have a general policy that I usually don't invest in physical product companies unless the landed BOM to MSRP multiple is at least 5x, right? So why is that? Well, if you're making a physical product, so landed bill of materials is like the fully loaded cost to make the thing and ship the thing into the United States, into a warehouse to be ready to sell to somebody else, right? Like that's what landed bill of materials means, right? So, and that includes taxes, duties, manufacturing costs, like all of it, packaging costs, like the whole thing is landed bill of materials. So then you say, okay, so say it's some hardware product or whatever, and say the landed bill of materials is $20. Okay. And they call you and they say, we're going to sell this thing for $40. Okay. So that's a 2x multiple. But then you say to yourself, okay, well, gosh, what are all the other costs for running this business? You know,
Right.
what are they spending on advertising? You know, what are they spending to acquire customers? What are they spending if they're putting it into a retail location? What kind of a retail markup are they having to pay? You know, all of the expenses to run a business, like it's just not enough. Like they don't have enough margin to
Right.
pay for everything else that it takes to run a business.
And they don't have
And
enough buffer, like we saw during the pandemic supply
yeah,
chain. To bring in anything was like 3,000. All of a sudden, the supply chain companies are like, "Hey, to get a crate over there, it's $9,000."
right,
So to your point, if something like that happens, you're out of business. There's no like room to wiggle. You're out of
right.
business. So I can
Yeah.
see
So
why that
so
makes
so what's better is, so if it costs you $20 to make the thing, well, then sell it for $100.
sense.
Now you've got plenty of room, right? So let's pretend like you want to put it in a retail location and they're going to charge a 50% markup. So that means your wholesale price going into the retailer is going to be $50. They're going to sell it for $100. Well, even if you're selling it into the retailer at $50, you still have $30. So that's an example of, just sort of like refining the filter over time, learning, kind of school of hard knocks style, right? Because what do I have? All I have is a high school diploma, right? Like I don't know anything. I'm just like a
Right.
dude. And but you learn through school of hard knocks, like, okay, well, gosh, I bet on this one company and their margin was terrible and they make a physical product and then it died. And then you look at the wreckage, you look at like, why did it die? You go, oh yeah, they just didn't have enough margin. Oh, the other thing that's kind of a slippery slope is sometimes you get on the phone with an entrepreneur and they'll say another common like physical product thing is MOQ, minimum order quantity. So they'll say, you'll say, okay, what's your landed bomb to MSRP multiple? And they'll say, oh, it's 2.5x or 3x. It's not quite 5x, right? And then you'll say, well, how many do you have to make? What's your minimum order quantity in order to actually make your first run? And then what is the minimum order quantity to actually get the margin to where you want it to be, right?
Right.
And understanding that, because obviously in many industries, the more of something you make, the lower the cost is to make the thing or to make the widget, whatever the widget is. And, so understanding that as well is very interesting, because sometimes you can bet on a business that doesn't quite have the margin that you want, but if they scale, it could have the margin, right? And so these are all the kind of really interesting variables that come up that are super fun, to sit down and talk to an entrepreneur about, that really cares about their business and has a mastery of the math, mastery of the numbers behind their business, and kind of pick through, and then it helps you decide whether or not it's like a good investment or not.
I love it. And this is, around the corner. So I really want to get into your project Tari,
Yeah,
but
sure.
but it's still, I feel like sometimes like we have to hear these stories. These are the stories I think that help entrepreneurs, is hearing what other entrepreneurs that are successful, what they're going through, what's the thought process. Because then now that you talk about Tari, I think it'll help people understand, like, oh, I understand his thought process about investment and entrepreneurship.
Sure, of
This is
course.
how he's applying it to what he's built. So tell us, what are you building at Tarih? Like, I could read the website, says open source, decentralized protocol that
Sure.
reimagines the future of digital assets. But like most websites, that's not gonna, a string of really great words. Individually, I think people understand what that means. But when you put them all together, maybe give us the 5-year-old version of exactly what Tari, or at least the problem Tari is trying to solve.
Yeah, sure. So Tari is a new layer one blockchain protocol. The way to think about it is it's sort of a next generation Ethereum or Solana, with very unique and different design decisions that open up a new world of possibilities when compared to those other legacy projects. The things that make Tari very, very unique compared to anything else are threefold. So the first thing that's really unique about Tari is a dual layer system. So there's sort of a layer one, and then there's also a native layer two. And the layer one for Tari is proof of work. And the reason why that's important is because when you think about these other systems, they're pretty exclusive, right? Like if you're a net new person, if you don't own any crypto today, if you don't have a wallet, if you don't have an exchange account, like imagine you know nothing about this industry and you want to get into, say, the Ethereum space or the Solana space, it's really hard. I mean, it's
Right.
really, really, really difficult. Just even setting up an account with an exchange is non-trivial. You have to like provide your government issued ID. You have to set up a bank account. You have to move your money over. You have to buy the coin. I mean, it's like a lot. It's just a lot. And the average person, so one of the things I believe firmly, and I forgot where I heard this, I didn't coin this. I can't take any credit for it. But I believe it. And it's so true is whenever you're designing a consumer product, every click that a user makes is a miracle. Every click is a miracle.
Right.
So when you create a process that has like 10 steps for someone to do a thing, you're asking for 10 miracles. And the crypto industry is notorious for this, right? It's notorious. Everything takes way too many clicks.
Right.
You have all these people out there who are focused on building protocols that have faster transactions per second, but no one is focused on reducing the number of clicks to do the thing. And so when you talk about on-ramping, onboarding a new user, to go from 0 to doing the first on-chain transaction on Ethereum is in many cases north of 10 steps. That's 10 miracles that you're asking for, right? So what we did with
In
Tari
a pretty complex scenario too, right? It's a complex environment. It's not like clicking a form. These are usually very complex processes that you're asking people to do.
That's
Some
right.
of those steps, you have to go research exactly how you're doing them because you're scared that, hey, if I do it wrong, I may lose my crypto or somebody may hack my account. So I think that's important to know as well.
Yeah, 100%. And so one of the things we did with Tari, as a contributor is, Tari is using what's called an ASIC resistant hashing algorithm, which means that you can mine Tari on your existing Mac or PC. And that's really important because it means that anyone can participate. When Tari is actually live, Tari's not live yet, it's just in testnet. But what that means is anyone could download software from the internet for free, install it on their computer, and then start to mine Tari. So what we then focused on is we focused on optimizing that user experience. So we built this incredible application called Tari Universe. And I'm going to see if I can share. Can I share my screen here? Let's see if this will work. Oh yeah, cool. So this is what Tari Universe looks like. And so this application is really kind of remarkable. This is the actual live application running on my laptop right now. I have a Mac. And all you have to do is download the software for free from the internet, install it on your Mac or PC, and open it up. And instantly what it does is it creates a wallet for you in the background, doesn't prompt you with seed phrases or any other crazy stuff. And it instantly drops you into this experience where you are literally mining the Tari testnet in this case. And what we've done is we've visualized the Tari blockchain as a tower, and you're competing with all the other people who are mining at this moment to build the next floor of the tower. And when you are successful at building a floor, then you earn some Tari as a reward. And what's, again, remarkable about this is it's literally like a couple steps. So you download the application for free, you install it, and you run it. And that's it. That's literally all you have to do.
And who do you think your target market would be for something like this? Is it just newcomers to the space, or if it's like, hey, people are tired of trying to, mine Bitcoin or Ethereum or contribute to these huge mining pools, and they want to feel like they're contributing to something that's their own that they can control?
So we actually have a hypothesis that blockchain protocols may be generational like social networks. So if you think about social networks, you start off with the Friendster era, then MySpace, then Facebook, then Instagram, then Snapchat, then TikTok, right? And each one of those social networks appeals to a different generation of person, right? And what if blockchains are similar? So if you look at it from that point of view, you'd say, okay, well, what is the blockchain for Gen Z? What's the blockchain for Gen Alpha? Do we really think that a Gen Z person is going to go through those 10 steps to onboard onto Solana or Ethereum? Or is Gen Z going to be really hyped about the world's easiest side hustle, which is downloading Tari Universe from the internet, installing it on their existing Mac or PC, and letting it run while they're in class or they're working their job or doing whatever they're doing and earning Tari rewards. Because this kind of an experience doesn't exist for any other protocol. There is no other protocol that has an experience that is this easy. This is so easy that my mother, who's almost 80 years old, is able to run this on her laptops. When you ask who's the audience is anyone who is an early adopter, regardless of their age, regardless of their demographic, regardless of where they are in the world. Anyone who believes that there should be a new financial system out there in the world, and anyone who believes that the fiat system is not in service to them, right? So think about it this way. If you had $100,000 in 2020, to have the same spending power now in 2024, you need $185,000, right?
Wow.
So we're all getting poorer by the moment, right? Like Bitcoin was born out of the 2008 financial crisis. We are still in a financial crisis. All anyone has to do is go to the grocery store and look at the cost of like fruits or vegetables or eggs.
Grapes are the killer. Grapes humble you. Grapes are like, yeah, I don't need those fruit. We'll go with whatever's a little bit cheaper, like apples.
Totally. It's crazy. You go to like, I have 3 kids, so it's a busy house, and we shop at Costco like many American families do. And when we go to Costco and we look at there are 2 things that happen, which are crazy. So one is the cost of things, but then the other thing is shrinkflation. Like when you buy a box of something, like it's a box of cereal or a box of crackers or whatever it is. And especially this boxes of cereal are notorious for this, where the box is a big box, right? It's a Costco box. It's a giant box. But then you open the box and you're like, this is like 50% air, man. Where's the cereal? It's 50% air. And then there's tons of content on the internet about this, where what they do is they change the net weight. So you look at the box and it shows the weight, and they say it's the same box, same size box, but they change the weight of that's called shrinkflation, right? So what ends up happening is, people out there don't feel wealthy. They don't feel financially secure. You got to remember, in America, we have 90 million Americans that have an hourly job. The average hourly worker in America is working 2.1 jobs. So we're a nation of gig workers, okay? So the way we think about something like Tari Universe is this is a product for everyone, because this is the world's easiest side hustle. If you've got a Mac or PC, you can install Tari Universe and you can earn Tari rewards, and anybody can do it. You don't need to have a PhD in blockchains. You don't need to know what ZK rollups are or zero knowledge proofs are. You don't need to know what stealth addresses are or what Mimblewimble is. You don't have to know about any of that stuff. You can download this beautiful application and you can install it yourself.
But what I'm curious about, Naveen, is that if it's easy, that means everyone can do it. It's like creating content. It's like saying, well, everyone can create content, but now there's more content because the barrier to access, similar to the barrier to buying Bitcoin, is extremely high due to complexities, cost, investment in machinery. If this is so easy, doesn't that also increase the difficulty if everybody's online trying to compete for Tari?
Yes, but there's a deep connection between the number of humans who care about a network and the ultimate usefulness of the network, right? So let's pretend success, and let's pretend that one day there's many, 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 many people, whatever number you want to put on it. Thousands, millions, I don't care, whatever number it is, a lot. And there are a lot of people doing this. And imagine that number is known out there in the world. Like, oh, did you know that there's 1 million people out there who are mining Tari using Tari Universe? That's really interesting. That's an interesting thing, because now there's 1 million people who care about Tari, who have conviction in Tari. They're using their computational power of their computer to mine Tari. They're helping to secure the network. The network is wildly secure. And that means the network is that much more useful, right? At the end of the day, something like this is intended to be a new value layer of the internet. So I think that trade-off, that idea of like, well, Naveen, what if there was only 5 people who were mining it and they got all the tokens, they got all the rewards? Well, then I would argue, I don't know that those rewards are very useful to those people, because there's only a couple of people who care. Whereas if you knew there's 1 million people who care, well, now it's really useful. Now you can really do something with it. right?
What
So
are some of those use cases? So for someone watching this, they're
sure,
like, cool, send me that software, let me make some extra money. But what do? They have Tari, like you
sure.
mentioned the L1 and 2 L2
Yeah,
aspect of it. So maybe just kind of walk us through the use case that you see in your head. Like
sure.
someone's buying this, or is the use case is like, hey, once we have enough people in the system, they can
Yeah.
also build on top of it as easily as they can mine.
Yeah. So there, as I mentioned, there were three key things that are unique about Tari. So I'll break down the other two things because I think they'll help answer your question. So the second thing about Tari that's really unique is confidentiality. So it's very interesting how in this industry we call things privacy coins, but then we don't call everything else surveillance coins, which is peculiar because if you think about it, I don't know, Steven, there's no online tool that I can use to see your bank balance, is there?
No, the transparency is I have 2 kids, so you know it's going to be low.
Is there an online tool that I can use to like see your credit card transactions in real time?
No.
Okay. So why do we think the future of finance should be one where everything is out and open for every single participant? Like, I don't know if you know this, but you can Google an Ethereum wallet address and get the balance. That's weird. That's not normal. As a consumer product person, one of the other belief systems that I have is that it's really important to meet users where they are. So if you really believe that and you go, okay, I want to meet users where they are, well, users already have pretty significant financial privacy, right? Like there's no online tool I can use to see your bank balance. There's no online tool I can use to see your credit card transactions in real time. Now, if you think about it from a business point of view, there's no business in the world that wants every employee to know how much other employees are being paid or how much
100%.
customer A is paid versus customer B or C. Could you imagine if you're running a business that's more like a consumer business, if anybody could see like a stack rank list of your top customers by revenue in real time, right? Nobody would use the system. Like no
Right.
businesses wouldn't be successful. Like I'll give you a real example. Imagine it's Delta Airlines and you could go on Dune Analytics. Delta Airlines was using like Ethereum for Sky Miles or something. And you could go on Dune Analytics and literally stack rank all of their frequent flyers by like revenue. And that data was available for American and United Airlines. What would happen? Those guys would be calling nonstop.
Right.
Nonstop. They'd be poaching those people all the time. All the time. So the idea that we've created these blockchain systems that are fully transparent, as what I would say they're surveillance systems, we actually think that those systems are incompatible with capitalism. They're just not compatible with capitalism. You can't build a business that way. So why would anyone choose to build a business on Ethereum or on Solana if you really zoom out and think about it? And so the way Tari works is Tari is default confidential. We understand in the Tari community that there's like it's really important to pay attention to compliance and regulatory matters as well. So the way that Tari is engineered is any developer on Tari who has a token or designs some sort of a system on Tari can design their smart contracts in a manner where they as the developer have full visibility into the transaction graph for their token. They can burn tokens, mint tokens, freeze funds. They can have a wow list. They can have deny lists. They can report to regulators, whatever they need to report to be fully compliant with, whatever is required in their respective jurisdiction. And that's also very important, by the way. We live in a world that is a patchwork quilt, right? What is legal here in America may not be legal in Singapore. And that's
That was going to
perfectly
be my
okay.
question, obviously, is that, someone with a compliance background, the law listers are going to be from a compliance background as well. The first thing is like, hey, I understand it's a surveillance point, but we have no other choice. In order for us to interact with Tari or any other blockchain for that matter, we need to check off certain requirements.
Totally.
And we don't mind. We want to get into Web3, we want to get into DeFi, but we still need to check certain
Sure.
requirements off in order
Yeah.
to interact with it.
So the goal of Tari is to enable you to have your cake and eat it too, right? It's to say, hey, look, you as the issuer, you as the developer have full visibility into your transaction graph. You can comply with, maybe you need to fill out suspicious activity reports in the US. You need to comply with some money transmission license requirement in the United States or whatever the requirements are. And you can do that on Tari. At the same time, the protocol is default confidential peer-to-peer, which, by the way, kind of matches how the traditional finance system works, right? Like, again, I can't see your bank balance, but the bank can. right?
Right.
Like, and the bank can report on whatever they need to report, or I can't see your credit card transactions, but the credit card issuer can, right? So to us, that is kind of like the right way to design the system. And also the other way to think about it is, Tari is a protocol, right? So Tari itself as a protocol is not really focused on compliance because Tari itself isn't like an application that exists on top of the protocol, similar to the World Wide Web, right? Like HTTP is a protocol that you use on the World Wide Web to like build websites. And the rules and regulations around websites are different in different countries. That's why when you're in Europe and you visit a website, you all see all those crazy privacy pop-ups, cookie permissions and
Right.
stuff. And you don't really see that in the US. That's because Europe has different rules and regulations that we have in the United States. But the protocol doesn't care. Like HTTP doesn't care about Europe's rules versus America's rules, right? It's incumbent on the website developer to comply with whatever the rules and regulations are. So that's kind of how we see the world from a confidentiality standpoint. And then the final thing about Tari that's very unique.
Sorry, just to interrupt. Do you mind
Yeah.
stop sharing unless there's something
Oh,
else you want to show
oh yeah.
us?
No, sorry. I'll stop.
No, no worries.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've
So the
marked it,
other,
so they'll remove that part of the conversation.
yeah, no problem. So then the other thing about Tari that's really important to note is how we think about the developer experience. So again, Tari is like a layer one blockchain protocol. The primary audience for Tari is developers, right? Like you want developers to build really amazing applications, the future of ticketing, the future of payments, the future of finance, lending, like all these kinds of things are the kinds of applications you can imagine people building on Tari, just like people imagine building those things on Ethereum or Solana. Those protocols have an Achilles heel. And the Achilles heel is that they don't actually give developers what they want. What do developers want? That's the $1 million question, right?
More tokens. More tokens is probably
No. What developers want more than anything in the world is distribution, right? So when you think about it, if I'm a developer and I'm building, say, some sort of application, why do you think developers are okay paying Apple an annual fee to be a developer and 30% of gross revenue for every dollar over $1 million? Why do you think people are willing to pay so much to Apple? Similar amount to Google, similar amount to Nintendo, similar amount to Sony, similar amount to Steam or Roblox or any other platform that has tons of users. The reason why is because they want the users. They want the distribution, right?
Because 30% of a lot is way better than 100% of very little.
Exactly. Okay. So now I want you to think about it. If you build an application for Ethereum or Solana, how do you get distribution? Right? And it's really hard. It's really, really, really difficult because the protocols themselves don't do anything for you. The best case outcome for you is a tweet.
Yeah. So
that is the best case outcome for you.
But they also have a lot of attention within communities within those, like, there is that sort of virality, maybe not directly from the platform, but from communities built within that platform and projects. There's still that kind of virality that a lot of, opaque blockchains don't get that same conversation, right? Like people just say Solana and meme coins. The first thing you're going to do is run to Solana and see what meme coins are available, which opens you up a little bit to more distribution. Do you not think that way,
Steven,
or no?
I mean, devil's advocate, how do you discover a new thing on Solana? Where's the discovery?
Wait for someone to tweet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? So in order for you to discover a new meme coin or discover a new dApp, what do you have to do? Just have your eyes peeled to Elon's algorithm? Or do you have to be in the right group chats with other random crypto people? Right? There's no app store for Solana. There's no place to actually go to discover. There's no place to search. Right? So this is like two sides of the same coin, right? So, and this is a critical problem, right? It's a critical problem. And there is no solution for Solana or Ethereum because there's no way for them to actually, at least I've not thought of a way, for them to actually solve this problem. So we're solving this problem for Tari. So the way we're going to do it is Tari Universe, which is, the thing I was showing you before. I'll show one more time briefly, just for context. So this is phase 1 of this product. Okay, this is version 1.0 of this product. Version 2.0 of this product, when the Tari Layer 2 launches, is going to look more like this. So imagine that same exact concept. This is free software. You download it from the internet, install it. It's crazy easy to use. Like my mom can use it. Anybody can use it. This isn't about like only crypto natives can do the thing. There's a mining button. You can mine Tari right here. You have your wallet right here. And then you have something over here that looks a lot like an app store.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you have the power of Tari at your fingertips. Any application, you can search for it, you can use it. You can imagine we can have latest dApps, top 10 dApps, different categories of dApps, like all the things that you can imagine sort of in like an app store experience, we can actually like implement in this kind of in this kind of way. And what's crazy about that is that solves two problems. It solves discovery. So now you aren't having to hunt on Twitter or hunt in like random Telegram chats or WhatsApp chats to hunt for the new thing, the hot new thing on Tari. It's right here at your fingertips. And then if you're a developer, this is huge because maybe we do have 1 million people mining Tari using Tari Universe someday. Now you imagine that. Oh, wow. I have two choices as a developer. I can develop something on Solana and the best thing I'm going to get is a tweet, or I can develop something on Tari and oh my gosh, they're gonna somehow, the community is gonna give me this top banner for weeks. And now I'm gonna onboard all 1 million Tari miners to use my application. Which one are you gonna choose? And we think the choice is obvious. We think that any developer given those two choices is gonna choose to build on Tari. So we think that
you basically take an OpenSea kind of UX and applied it directly to Ethereum for Ethereum projects. Is that a good assessment?
Well, but the problem is Ethereum doesn't have the distribution,
Right.
right? So you won't have an application like this that exists for Ethereum. It'll never have the same number of users because there's no economic incentive to install it. See, and Tari leverages proof of work mining to create the economic incentive. So the reason why we have a chance of getting 1 million people to install Tari Universe, for example, is because they can mine Tari. There's no way to mine Ethereum because Ethereum is now proof of stake. If you don't have at least 32 ETH, you're not actually like a real node on the network, you know? So you need to be rich already in order to play the rich person's game, which is an Ethereum game. Same with Solana. If you want to run a validator node on Solana, you need to have a hyper powerful computer. Oh my God, crazy power. You know, like it's like a 300 megabit internet connection and like an insane amount of RAM. I mean, you need to have like, it's like nuts. So the idea here is to say, let's bring this back to earth. Let's make it permissionless. Let's make it what Bitcoin was early on. Like early on in Bitcoin, you could download free software from the internet, you can install it on your computer, and you can mine Bitcoin on your PC. That's what Bitcoin was back when Bitcoin launched. There's no protocol that exists that is like that now, really, truly. Tari wants to run it back and bring that concept back and modernize it and say, okay, that was the right idea. But let's implement it in a way that it actually works because Bitcoin doesn't work in that way. You need to have really expensive hardware now to mine Bitcoin. You need to have ASICs, custom hardware. And then let's augment the functionality of the mining software to solve multiple problems at once. We're solving a distribution problem, we're solving an accessibility problem, and we're solving a distribution problem and discovery problem all within a single application. And that is not something that is easy for other protocols to replicate.
And how how do you solve for some of the missteps that other, when we think about Solana, everyone talks about the downtime. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something that conversation, you hear in every conversation. We talk about, Bitcoin scalability issue, although we're seeing a little bit of a revival this year with L2 projects and people using Bitcoin to stake on, proof of stake blockchains. Like, how do you avoid some of the missteps of the other blockchains?
Yeah, I mean, look, the best way to avoid the missteps is to learn from their mistakes. So Tari has a native ELT that's very high performance, sub 1 second finality, very, very scalable. And, we're paying very close attention to the challenges that other protocols have had. And we're not saying that Tari is perfect. Like Tari is, is early software. It's like in development, who knows what challenges may arise Tari in the future. But, the contributors to Tari are a really smart group. They're really talented. They're paying very close attention to challenges that other protocols have faced. And, I think the contributors have a really strong track record. They have a really strong track record of building things that have scaled to millions and millions of users. We understand the trade-off and sort of the design decisions that are being made, right? So we know that proof of work systems, can be hyper decentralized and, really permissionless and, really, really interesting from a security model point of view. But we know that they're not very high performance, right? That's why, for example, with Ethereum, you have, this like proliferation of L2s. But we know that the proliferation of L2s on Ethereum is also a problem. It makes Ethereum really hard to use. It's like, oh, someone's going to send you ETH. Are they sending you Arbitrum ETH, Optimism ETH,
Yeah.
ZK Sync ETH, Scroll ETH? What flavor of ETH are you getting? One time I was staking some ETH somewhere and I got paid in USDC.E. I was like, what the heck is that?
And where can I use them? Where can I
What?
catch that
Yeah,
up?
what does that even mean? USDC.E. And it's USDC.E on an L2. So I think there's like a very serious kind of Rube Goldberg machine problem with Ethereum that a lot of Ethereum people are just not willing to talk about. And the reason why the Tari community has decided to have a native L2, a canonical L2, is because it makes it less interesting for other people to then spin up their own L2s on top of Tari when there's sort of a native one that everyone knows exists and there's like there's a singular token economy around it. So again, there's lots of thought, lots of concepts and ideas and philosophies that have gone into the development of Tari over a very long period of time. Tari's been in development for 7+ years. So it takes a lot of effort to engineer something like this. And, we're really excited because I think those three differentiating factors that I laid out for you, I think have the potential to make Tari a truly next generation protocol when compared to the competition.
And what's the main use case? Because you said like, hey, you want developers in there to build. What are they looking to build? Has there been any like front runners? Is like, hey, a lot of people want to build, whether it's maybe a DeFi application or like, hey, we want strictly gambling. We don't want any of the other nonsense or disruptions that Ethereum has. We want to do specific things, which is what we saw a lot of L2s come into Ethereum for. Was just like, hey, we just want to do a specific thing. Ethereum's too broad. We need to kind of narrow it down. What are some of the things that people are eyeing on the Tari node?
I actually think that general purpose systems are okay, right? I think like that specialization you're talking about, I think is happening because there's so many L2s. They're sort of like, well, we're going to be the DeFi L2. And then someone else is like, well, we're going to be the gaming L2. So, hey, DeFi guy, we should be friends because we don't really compete, even though we kind of do, I think that's like baloney. I think it's basically baloney. And so our view is that, hey, these systems are really compelling because you can create really unique kinds of digital assets on them, right? Like a digital asset created on something like Tari is kind of like a skeleton key, right? Can be something that can be used to unlock anything else on the system, right? You can have massive amounts of composability. You can do all kinds of really interesting things with these digital assets. And those core primitives are applicable in the world of DeFi, collectibles, payments, gaming, all the same. So the idea that I'm going to say, oh, you know what, Tari is limited to just like this one vertical, I think that's actually like an Ethereum invention in terms of that like line of thinking. I think, and I think it's dumb. So the idea that we have for Tari is like, look, let's make Tari the best developer platform in the world. And by best in the world, meaning we really solve the core problem the developers care about more than anything, which is distribution. And then let's enable those developers to build really cool things on Tari that range from payments. So for example, there's already a stablecoin issuer that is planning on issuing a US dollar denominated stablecoin on Tari. So why is that interesting? There's a lot of stablecoins. Like why do we need another stablecoin? Well, there isn't a stablecoin that is actually private, right? Like by default private, right? But still fully regulated. And that's valuable, right? Like when you think about the front running stablecoins out there, they don't have meaningful confidentiality features. So that reduces their usefulness. you can't really use them for business payments or other kinds of things at the level that you would want. So that's really interesting. Because Tari has confidentiality features, now Delta Airlines could use Tari for something like Sky Miles. You would never be able to do that on Ethereum because there's no confidentiality. So why would they do it, right? So Tari has unique primitives. Think about DeFi. One of the biggest problems with DeFi is front running, right? We call it MEV, right? Front running. The whole idea that, oh, I can look at the mempool, I can see that you're about to do a transaction, and I can eat your lunch. I can front run you. I can sandwich attack you. I can front run you in other ways. And therefore, you think you're going to get 100 tokens out of the transaction. You really got 94 tokens out of the transaction because arbed.
I think what was new to me and why that didn't make a lot of sense is like, especially when you're buying an NFT, if these miners in the mempool see that a lot of people are buying a specific NFT, they can go front run your transaction,
100%.
buy that NFT. Now you're out the gas plus you're out the token. And I think that's what we saw a lot during the 2021 craze. And it didn't really,
crazy.
Hit people, the average user's radar until much later. We're running low on time, but I want to just ask a couple questions, or I'm going to finish.
Well, one thing, let me just point out that the reason why I brought that up is because Tari is default confidential, which means that front running transactions is much harder. It's much harder on Tari because you have less available information to front run. So these are the kinds of things to think about. When you think about Tari, you say, well, what kind of applications? It's like, well, there's a lot of really unique things you can do with Tari that you just really can't do anywhere else. So sorry. Are you happy to answer?
No, I just wanted to ask you because I think we've had a lot of, whether it's this show or other shows we produce, there's a lot of, I think people may box you or misrepresent you with other things. So I want to go through maybe some of those other things.
Sure.
If you know about it, you could just say a quick one sentence of what differs you. Like Ironfish is a big one. It's, privacy, L1 blockchain, I believe. How do you differ from, Ironfish?
Yeah, I mean, again, so, one of the things, I mentioned this to you before we started recording, there are two ways to sell a knife, right? So one way to sell a knife is, this is a steak knife, and I'm going to use it to cut steak. The other way to sell a knife is, this is a murder weapon. Same exact product, right? One of the really interesting things about Tari is, even though Tari is default confidential, we do not promote Tari as a privacy product. Like if you visit the Tari website, you actually don't see the word privacy really anywhere or confidentiality, because what we realized is that it's a feature. It's a feature of the system. It doesn't need to be like the headliner, right? It's not like this is the headlining act at Coachella. So I think a lot of these systems, I mean, whether it's the one you mentioned, Ironfish, or, there's others out there that are, purporting to be like privacy things, is I think they make this like critical mistake in terms of how they communicate what the heck they do. And then the other problem is the user experience. Go try doing something on one of these other systems. And
I was going to ask you about Monero, but I know I haven't done too much on Monero, but I know it's clunky. So that was going to be my next question.
Yeah. So Monero is really interesting because, like, look, I started my career, if you want to call it that, mining Monero. One of the other core contributors to Tari is Fluffy Pony, who's the former lead maintainer of Monero. So we love Monero. I think Monero is incredible. And what I love about Monero is that Monero has a very crisp and concrete mission, which is privacy over all else.
Right.
That is Monero's mission. And Monero achieves that mission with aplomb. I think that our hope and dream is for something like Tari to learn a lot from Monero, but it's a different type of thing, right? So Monero is more private. You have to imagine confidentiality as a spectrum. It's not binary. So Monero is definitely more confidential than Tari is, right? It has more confidentiality features than Tari does. Tari makes different trade-offs. So the trade-offs with Tari are focused more on user experience, focused more on building, supporting developers' need for distribution and building decentralized applications. Those are not things that Monero is focused on, but that doesn't mean that Monero is like, old or wrong or bad or any of that. Right. It's just Monero has a different, on that,
which is
it's a different focus.
Yeah.
And so we actually think that Monero and Tari are like complementary, right? Like we think they're complementary. Like Tari is just a different kind of animal, a different focus. And so that's how I'd respond regarding Monero.
I think I like the aspect, especially even the start when I asked you about Tari. I thought you were going to go straight into the privacy, but you're talking about confidentiality as a feature, which I think is different than like really focusing on privacy.
No,
Because you realize that there are use cases where you're going to have to flip off that switch in order to bring in more users, as you said, in order to bring in a better user experience.
the first thing I started with when I started talking about Tari was start with this. I
Yeah.
started about user experience and how easy it is, right? That is our focus. That is the headline for Tari. That is the headliner for Tari. If this was a Coachella, poster, you'd put user experience at the top.
You be
That's-
day one, right?
That's number one.
You're Beyonce.
Yeah. That's our Beyonce. Our Beyonce is user experience. It's not confidentiality. That's just a feature.
And what happens to people that see this, they listen to this podcast, they're like, I want to do that. I got a Mac Studio here that I use for designing. I want to get in on Tari, but you're still in testnet. So, maybe when can people start mining for real, or could they be a part of the testnet? And then what do they do? Like, just like you said, you received, USDC.ETH. You're like, hey, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
That might be for other people that are like, hey, send me some crypto. And you're like, yeah, I have this Tari I'm all down to. They're like, well, I can't really do anything with that. What are your thoughts around those two concepts?
So anyone who's interested can visit universe.tari.com and sign up for our waitlist for Tari Universe, which is the product I just showed you. That's our beautiful interface. Launched our sign up, I think maybe like 4 weeks ago, kind of like mid-August timeframe. And we already have over 220,000 people on the waitlist, totally organically. So it's definitely resonating out there. People, I think, both in crypto and outside of crypto, are really excited about this idea of being able to participate in something from the ground floor without having to farm, without having to like put money into the till. I think that's exciting for a lot of people. So we would love for people to participate in the testnet. We'll be onboarding those users that are on our waitlist over the coming like month or so. And then, our plan is to launch the Tari mainnet at some point later this year. That's our hope. In terms of your question about like, well, I have a bunch of Tari, now what? Well, that goes back to the original point that I made, which is the more people that are mining Tari and like the more distribution there is for Tari Universe, the more useful Tari is, right? Because then all of a sudden you ask that same exact question and people are like, oh, Tari? Totally. What do you want to do with your Tari? Right? Whereas if there's only 5 people mining Tari, then people will be like, oh, you have Tari? Yeah, I don't accept that. Or I don't care about that, because no one cares about that. So the more people that are invested, that like care, that have conviction in a thing, the more useful the thing is. And I think that's really ultimately the answer to that kind of a question.
I love it. This was a great conversation. Any last parting statements for the audience other than to sign up, get on that wait list, and at least take it? At least this is an actual application that they can try, right? All the other things like, yeah, Solana mine, you're like, okay, I have to wait until someone, either I have to buy it or they send it to me, because I can't really participate.
Totally.
You're kind of like participation day one. An important aspect for what you're doing.
I mean, it's crazy. Today we just opened up like the first 1,000 people on the wait list, and the response was wild. People are like hyped because, to your point, it's an actual product. It's an actual thing I can download and use and try and experiment with. Like most of these other protocol projects, it's like it's in the cloud somewhere. You're like, I don't even know what this means. Like, what the hell does this thing mean, right? So anyway, parting words is, thanks for having me. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Really enjoyed the conversation. Excited. If anyone is curious about Tari, you can follow me on Twitter if you want. I'm Naveen Spark, I think, on Twitter. I don't even remember. What is my...
We'll have all your... you left it with us, so we'll make sure everything is in the show notes for everyone,
I'm Naveen
including
Spark
the
on
website
Twitter.
to jump on there. Naveen, it was great talking. Thanks for like really being candid about the whole experience of being an entrepreneur. It really seems like you're really passionate about this project. And the use case, I was going to ask you, in the middle of this conversation, people really care about privacy, but I think you answered it with a bunch of really relevant use cases, business transactions. I'm in Canada, so we all remember the Freedom Convoy when people wanted to donate to that using GoFundMe. Then they were using crypto, and how fast the government started contacting the crypto exchanges. So see, and even in donating to Ukraine, you couldn't do so through GoFundMe because it was being used for military equipment. We saw that, this decentralized fundraising, the ways to kind of own your own, even if you're not spending 100% of the time on it. It's
Yeah,
nice, as you say, I don't know if you use the word side hustle. I think he did, but
I
it's
did.
nice
Yeah.
to have something where you can operate on your own and
Yeah.
have yourself in your own space and where you control what's happening versus, as you say, the crypto Twitter people telling you what's good and what's not good. You can actually go find out for yourself for once.
Yeah. I'll leave you this one thing. Okay. We're all human beings. Human beings throughout their life evolve and change. We're not static, right? I'm a different person after this conversation than I was before the conversation, right? That's just natural. That's part of that's part of the human experience. And part of being a human being is that we make mistakes. That's just how every human being makes mistakes, right? And I think it's anti-human to build systems where every single financial transaction you make is a scarlet letter. I think that is crazy. And I think anyone who's a proponent of that is anti-human, because that's not what a human. Could you imagine a world where maybe it's like a dating service, a dating app or something, and the dating app has all of your financial transaction history from the beginning of time? That is the feature that the Ethereum people are promoting. It's crazy. It's absolutely batshit crazy. That's not the world that anyone should want to live in. Or imagine you're applying for a job and the person who's reviewing your resume can pull up a system and see all of your financial transactions at the beginning of time. And they start asking you weird questions like, well, you go to the bars a lot, like, does that mean you're irresponsible? It's like, dude, none of your fucking business. What are you talking about? Right.
And that sounds like a weird concept until you see we're only getting more digital. So those transactions are, when we get to a little more conversion to, everyone's dealing with digital assets, they're going to be able to go back and look. You can't go erase that transaction, buying that DGen coin back in 2022, to your point.
Totally.
So as we get more digital, this will become more relevant. Similar to like having a MySpace and social media back in the day, you can't erase those pictures for the most part, of you in the club harassing a girl or doing whatever. And I think I see your point there.
Let's focus on building pro-human technology. I am not a pro-bot person. I'm literally wearing a shirt that talks about robots destroying people's jobs, right? That's literally the shirt I'm wearing. I'm wearing a Rage Against the Machine hat. Now, what's the machine? There are many types of machines to rage against. One of the machines to rage against is bots. And I think there's a fetish in the Ethereum community for AI agents and bots. And oh my God, people are going to be operating for me. That's cool. But dude, let's focus on making the human experience better. Let's enable humans to participate in the future economy. I am pro-human, and I think we should all be pro-human together.
And we're going to have to come back for a part 2 when the testnet launches. And we'll talk about the other aspects of, completely transparent transactions, including, to your point, if marketers know how much, is going to your Ethereum address, they'll get started with the airdrops and the phishing scams.
Crazy.
And, the crypto journey. We haven't even got into wallet drainers and all those other aspects. We'll probably save that for version 2 of this conversation.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Naveen.
All right.